At a store called Kang's Makatsu, a banner announced the first place for the new employee in the Seoul group, the eldest daughter of Kang Makatsu. Voices spread as several women chatted, and a brown-haired woman with bangs was trying on some business clothes. Next to her, a woman and 2 boys complimented her because the clothes were worth every penny invested, and the boys praised their sister, saying she looked great like that. She seemed very mature that way, although she could only think about the cost calculations of using those clothes. It was 5 workdays for 52 weeks, which amounted to 260 times. If she wore them once every 3 days, it was still 87 times. If she did this for 3 years, then those clothes would cost 1,000 won per day, which were good costs for someone making long-term investments. Moving her arms, she tested the clothes, realizing this might be the only thing she would wear for 3 months, making a woman sigh and ask Mingyang what it all meant. After all, she was a smart girl, so she knew she would do well wherever she went, but she still couldn't help but feel worried. Work was different from school, with mandatory overtime, irrational bosses, company policies. There would be moments when things happened for no reason at all. So, no matter what happened, she should remember these 3 things. First, the woman advised her to do what her superiors told her without arguing or complaining. Second, she should tell people what they wanted to hear, instead of what she really felt. And lastly, she should just smile, no matter what happened. It had been 10 years since then, and Mingyang acted exactly as her mother had told her, obeying her superiors, saying the right things, always with a smile. And with her superhuman business acumen, she became the top employee, first in the employee training workshop, earning first place in the performance evaluation. She was the colleague everyone wanted to work with, the #1 athlete on the company's sports day, first in the company trivia, first in customer satisfaction, among others. She excelled at everything and was climbing through the promotions, becoming the youngest senior manager ever, or at least she should have been until the day before, when she heard she would become an executive assistant because there would be an official designation soon. Therefore, she would become the executive assistant and advisor to TK Corporation's CEO, Isiop Ta. Although she was a senior manager now, suddenly they wanted to demote her to a secretary's job, even after 10 years of working so hard. Suddenly, she was going through this hardship, which made Mingyang question whether she had made any mistakes, so she asked to know exactly what had happened. Her boss denied it was the case, smiling because, quite the contrary, she was brilliant at everything. Despite that, he knew it was an unexpected move on his part. It was a pity for him too, as he didn't want to lose such a talent like her. Sighing, he told her she was the only one in the entire company who could handle the infamous CEO Isiop Ta. Moreover, CEO Ta said she would see that Song Bakjae would make her a suitable offer. Cypress pines formed a green barrier, and even the sunlight shining through them seemed harsh. A historical symbol of South Korean business, this was also the home of the TK Group's CEO, Siwon Ta. Thinking about going to Songbakje meant that her fate would soon be decided by the TK Group's CEO, Siwon Ta. It was all or nothing. This could be the biggest opportunity of her life or the greatest crisis ever. Thus, CEO Ta packed his bags to travel, looking ready to go on vacation somewhere. Next to him, CEO Ta was called by a young man in a suit, who was the manager Jichaeum Kim, who asked him if he had a good flight. He agreed while handing his bags to Kim, who smiled and said the business trip must have been stressful. Still, stressful wasn't quite the word, because for Isiop, the business trip was just an excuse. He hadn't taken a vacation in years because he had been too busy working. This was his chance to finally unwind. 34 years ago, he gave his life to TK so that he could have Songbakje someday, only for Junseop to suddenly appear and take over the company's business. Because of that, despite being angry, he let Junseop take care of everything and just went on the business trip without even warning. Eager to see how the company would function without his presence, he got into the car to head to the Cheongdam apartment. Kim, while driving, told him that they were instructed to take him directly to the strategy office once he landed from his flight. This caught Isiop by surprise, sighing because he was exhausted, so they should go home instead, when he received a call. Annoyed again, he wondered who was calling just as he had gotten off his plane. He noticed, picking up the phone, that it was Junseop himself, so he quickly hung up without thinking twice, as he just wanted to relax. However, he couldn't even do that, because the car stopped in traffic, where numerous cars honked, further irritating him, making Isiop complain that it must be all Junseop's fault again, especially since he was calling once more. When Kim agreed that this was the case, Isiop told him to either hang up or answer the call until the manager showed him that it was actually Secretary Ming-Young Kang calling. This made Isiop widen his eyes, wondering if this was the same one who joined the company at the same time as him. Kim confirmed that she was indeed the manager, while Isiop thought that he always knew she was odd, but now wondered why she was calling the executive director directly like this. At this, Kim mentioned that he would probably need to answer, which made Isiop question why, as it was irritating. Either way, he answered the call, to which Kang smiled as she greeted him, because from now on, she would be his personal secretary and executive assistant. This made Isiop question why such a talented manager as her would be his secretary, and if it was all Junsup's fault. Letting out a nervous laugh, she replied that he could get the details later with him, and she would even pass the phone to him directly. Isiop wondered if Junsup had lost his mind, saying that she wasn't his secretary, so she should stop with these jokes. It was a bit too much to drop on someone who had just returned from a business trip, and he was going to rest, so she should inform him of that. Then, he simply hung up on Kang, who smiled as she told Junsup that Isiop had hung up. At that, Junsup smiled too, and told her to proceed with the schedule anyway, while meanwhile, Isiop managed to find some time to lie down in his bed and rest, or so he thought until his phone started vibrating again with another call. This made him sigh and sit up in bed to answer the call, asking what had happened now. In response, Kim asked if he could come in for a moment, mentioning that he was outside his house. That was because senior manager Kang wanted to come in as well and was there with him, which made him jump out of bed in total shock, asking how she had figured something like that out, until Kang herself grabbed Kim's phone to talk to him directly. At that, Isiop questioned if she really had to do everything they told her like that. She had her own job to take care of, and besides, she had made the whole trip there. Still smiling, she replied that from that day on, she would be working as his personal secretary and executive assistant. This made him widen his eyes in surprise, and Kang agreed because this was a direct order from Song Baekje. That's why she regretted that they didn't have much time to waste, so she would enter his house now, whether he liked it or not. This made Isiop shout, running out of bed, but ending up tripping and falling hard on the floor, dropping his phone. Right in front of the door, he rushed to get dressed before Kang could enter and see something she shouldn't. However, Kang opened the door anyway after a moment, greeting him good morning, only to see the scene of Isiop barely able to get up, flustered. After seeing him blush, she slowly backed away and closed the door as if nothing had happened, leaving Isiop shouting in frustration and embarrassment. A little while later, he came out to talk with the two outside, with Kang commenting that they still had 15 minutes left, asking if that was enough time for him, which Isiop denied, saying he wasn't ready at all because he hadn't even showered yet, was hungry, and had nothing to wear. Adjusting her glasses, Kang reassured him that everything was fine, pointing to Kim, who immediately showed two outfits ready, dry, and clean for him to wear. Moreover, they had prepared sandwiches for breakfast, though Isiop said he didn't eat sandwiches. Kang insisted, saying it was a ham and cheese sandwich without vegetables, just the way he liked it, and they also prepared eggs for his breakfast. That shut him up, as Ken then said she would present him with a detailed agenda in the car, but he complained that it wasn't the most important thing. Pointing at her, he questioned whether a secretary really had permission to enter his house like that. This was a personal space, so he would do whatever he wanted inside his house. He could even walk around naked like before if he wished. Leaning in, he asked if she could really handle this, which made her ask if he felt uncomfortable because she was a woman. This made Isiop go silent before bursting out in laughter, finding that stupid question hilarious. He wouldn't feel uncomfortable over something like that. At that, Kang smiled, concluding it was a relief that he felt comfortable around her, continuing to say they had 10 minutes left until departure. She also pointed out that there was little time for his shower, so she instructed Kim to bring the hot towel they had prepared in advance, knowing this would happen. She put on gloves while Kim helped with the cleaning products, ready to start helping him clean up, which startled Isiop. He questioned what all this was and why they were carrying these weird things, demanding they get them out of his sight right now. With that, the two stared at each other for a long moment before Isiop sighed, asking them to wait, saying he would finish washing in 5 minutes. He noticed her long, straight hair, her boring glasses, the two-piece suit, keeping the same appearance for 10 years somehow, which was incredible. She hadn't changed a ball since the first time he saw her, and yet Isiop had never liked how she irritated him. As usual, when they introduced the top employees of the 53rd class in the TK employee training group. In first place, Kang received that recognition, and various applause from others followed, with Usopp standing just behind her, in second place. His whole life had been aimed at earning the title of TK Group's successor. Fortunately, he was able to meet everyone's expectations, with people always praising him. When he was still a child, they called him gifted, but all of it was thanks to his incredible effort to achieve that great recognition. That's why Usopp had never fallen below first place, but suddenly, he was in second place for the first time in his life. On that day, people greeted them with applause as the two best employees of the company in front of everyone. Despite that, Usopp wasn't happy at all being behind her, clenching his fists furiously to the point of shaking. In the present, after the shower, he began drying his hair with a hairdryer, ensuring he used the 5 minutes given, receiving praise from Kang for it. The two stared at each other again, with Usopp still somewhat surprised because, of all people, he never expected her to become his secretary. He put on his dress shirt, telling Kang that he never liked clingy secretaries, sticking by his side all the time. After a moment of silence, she responded that she would try hard to adjust to his preferences, and he began to disagree. That, in fact, he was very good at false kindness, so he could put up with people he didn't like. Still, he intended to be straightforward with her, stating that he didn't like Manager Kang at all. This made her widen her eyes, hearing from Usopp that since the first day of employee training, from the moment they were placed in the same group, he never liked her. He leaned in close to her, suggesting that she should quit and resign. Then after another moment of silence that made her tense, Kang asked for permission to respond, saying that they were actually 7 minutes late, so they should leave right away, shocking him because she had simply ignored everything he had just said, and both Kang and Kim pointed out that President Siwon was waiting for him. The perfectly calm scene made him sigh, finally agreeing to leave after finishing getting dressed. Walking down the halls, Kang still remembered Usopp telling her he didn't like her, wondering about that, because in truth, she never liked Usopp either, since the first day they saw each other, more than 10 years ago. Even though he was supposedly the heir to the TK group, from her perspective, he seemed more like a spoiled prince. During the car ride, as they continued to their destination, Kang looked at him through the reflection. Kang couldn't help but think that, in terms of appearance, Usopp was exactly her type of guy. A week ago, Kang had met with the CEO of the TK group, Siwon Tae, who said he had heard a lot about her from director Junseop. She must have been a very efficient worker, which is why he hoped she would take good care of his boy. Usopp Ta. Hearing this made her a bit nervous, stuttering that she still had much to learn, until Siwon interrupted, mentioning that he had heard her younger brothers were athletes, promising ice sports athletes. If they were anything like her, they surely must have been quite talented. At TK, they liked supporting talented athletes, reminding her of what Junseop said, that soon she might find out that Song Bakjae would make her an offer. It suited her, the red in the depths of his eyes in a way that made Kang break into a cold sweat, wondering if this was what the director had been talking about. When she left the meeting with Siwon, she sighed because that conversation had been so intimidating it made her tremble in place. His beastly eyes stared at her, as if to say she'd better do an excellent job. Taking a deep breath, Kang tried not to stay scared for too long after all. She had worked hard and done well so far. Her twin brothers were probably very worried about money. If her younger siblings didn't have to worry about anything but training, that would be good. It was then, just as she was thinking about them, that she received a call from her two brothers, celebrating on the other end of the line. They truly were a blessed family with a sponsorship from TK Corporation, and Kang stammered that she was happy for them, thinking that as long as they were happy, that was all that really mattered to her, even if she had to keep working under these circumstances. Back to the present, as she thought about how Usopp was still totally her type, she had to restrain herself because she couldn't dwell on that too much. Taking a deep breath, she tried to keep composed because she needed Usopp's approval at any cost to secure funds for her brothers and family. And so, her first day as Usopp Tae's assistant and personal secretary began. When they arrived, the conversation between Usopp and Siwon started, with the grandson bringing a gift for him as a memento because he had received the same from him as a child. Smiling, he asked how his grandfather's health was, to which Siwon replied that he was fine this time, though his shoulders were tense. Watching them, the protagonist thought he seemed like a completely different person from the last time she saw him. As Isiop suggested that they go on a trip together, Kang thought he seemed compassionate, but the grandfather responded that he felt more comfortable at home. To Kang, it seemed that Isiop was the only person who could make Siwon feel at ease. It was then that Siwon began to talk to her as well, looking at her seriously while asking if she was doing her job properly. She hesitated, wondering why she was getting that intimidating look, and replied that it was her first day, so some things could still be improved. Siwon agreed because she had been a bit late, and Kang promised that wouldn't happen again, squeezing her trembling hands. This made Isiop notice her reaction, wondering what was wrong since she was acting like the complete opposite of before. The old man continued, saying he expected a lot from her, and she responded that she wouldn't let him down. Although she kept nervously replying that she would do her best to meet expectations, Isiop thought she seemed terrified for some reason. It was then that Siwon said he wanted his grandson to visit Sunbaekjae more often to say hello and report on business, pressuring Kang to remember this, which she quickly agreed to, as Siwon insisted that Isiop was the heart of TK Corporation. And that was why he needed TK's most talented employee as his assistant. This time, it was Isiop who stammered, agreeing that there was no one better for the job than Manager Kang, until he began talking about something, which made the protagonist nervous, worried that he was going to start talking about the incident of visiting his house and her being his secretary. Kang didn't want to risk getting fired on her first day, and he noticed that she was genuinely breaking into a cold sweat this time. This made him hesitate before continuing, mentioning how she was acting as his secretary, which made Kang grab his arm, shaking her head with red, almost teary eyes, in a way Isiop had never seen before, which made him nervous too. After she interrupted almost 3 times, Siwon asked what the problem was and what exactly he wanted to say. Finally, Isiop said that he just wanted to thank his grandfather for appointing her as his secretary, thus ignoring the previous topic. Later, they left the meeting with Siwon, with Kang sighing in relief, exhausted after just one conversation. She almost felt that it was because she had pushed herself too hard at work that day, so she headed back to her apartment. Barely able to wait for the chance to take a shower and relax, she opened the door to her house. Startled when she saw her brothers running to greet her, happy because they had been waiting and even complained about how long she took to arrive. Also, there was Kang's roommate, C.A. Lee, who greeted her with a smile, seeing that she must have been tired. She probably hadn't eaten yet either, so she was preparing something, but Kang was still too confused and surprised by everyone's presence there. Lee mentioned that she had heard the good news from her twin brothers, and that's why they were preparing a surprise party. After understanding that, Lee told her to take a shower while the twins agreed they wanted to help in the kitchen. Seeing the chaos of the lively conversation, Kang wondered what they were good for when she was the one carrying all the burden. Anyway, she went to shower and came out a little later, relieved after shaking off some of the exhaustion. With that, Lee commented that her older brother would be arriving soon, and they could all eat together once he got there. This caught Kang off guard, especially since the doorbell rang when Lee's brother arrived, and she ran out to greet him. She greeted him happily, excited to see her brother after a long time, asking when he returned to Korea and if he got stuck in traffic. A little later, Kang also came out of her room to meet Lee's brother, who smiled at her after it had been so long since they last saw each other. Smiling, the protagonist greeted Hyun-sung, Lee's brother, surprised that he hadn't mentioned he was coming back. This made him laugh, saying it seemed she was still the same as ever to react like that. And then he patted Kang's hair, making her blush a little. She then tugged on her shirt, asking if he was referring to that, and he agreed because she still liked that childish character on her shirt. Kandolko was her favorite character from the children's TV show, Veggie Rangers. The more he peeled, the more appealing he became, but he wasn't very popular among kids. In fact, they were all like one big family, as they were born and raised in the same town, so naturally, they were quite close. Since Pang graduated earlier than other kids, she had no friends her age when she entered the best school in the country at 17. However, both Lee and Hyan were still part of her youthful memories, where they spent a lot of time together during that period. Hyan was her senior in school, and he helped her a lot since she entered the school so young. He was like a reliable older brother. Now, they were all toasting together at the dinner table, with Lee laughing that it was a shame Kang didn't appreciate the refreshing taste of beer. She always said she was missing out on one of life's greatest pleasures, which made Kang laugh because there was nothing to be done when she couldn't handle alcohol. But it would be nice to drink on a day like that, making Lee celebrate because the twins had been sponsored by TK and Hyun had landed a new job. So, they were going to celebrate those achievements, prompting the twins to comment that Hyun was truly amazing for being hired by a law firm. It really was incredible of him, and they asked if he was back in Korea for good now. Hyun agreed and said he was planning to settle there, having been assigned to work with TK Corporation. So, he asked which department the protagonist worked in, and she laughed because she had just started working there. In fact, Lee excitedly mentioned that it was her first day as a secretary, which made her deflate immediately as she remembered it. Still, Lee kept asking her opinion about working with the infamous Isiopta, and she stammered to respond. This made her friend laugh, noticing her look of disgust, to the point where she continued with interview-like questions. That was because Isiop was the only paternal grandson of Siwon Tae, the CEO of the country's leading company, the TK Group. Since childhood, he had been the likely successor to TK, and he was known for his doll-like appearance, capturing the nation's attention with his noble image. This attention led paparazzi and reporters to invade his privacy, which could be why he avoided the media and disappeared from the public eye as he grew up. As a result, various rumors about his beauty were spreading like legends even now. That's why Lee was so excited that Kang had been assigned to work alongside a third-generation heir, so handsome that people exchanged photo cards of him. But still, she had nothing to say about it. Besides, if she were his executive assistant, it could be a big stepping stone to success within the company. Slowly, the protagonist agreed and said she'd just be happy not to get fired, which immediately caught Lee's attention. Sweating a little, Kang confessed that Isiop didn't like her much, making everyone scream in shock, asking why. She explained that they had started at the company at the same time, and it seemed like they weren't compatible for some reason, because he had said he didn't like her from the day he saw her during training, and she also saw him as an idiot. They didn't get along but still had to work together. It was an uncomfortable, symbiotic relationship. Sighing, Hyun commented that it must be stressful to work with Isiop when they didn't get along, but had to spend all their time together. Still, the protagonist replied that it was worth it for the incentives she received in return, though seeing the tension in her shoulders. Hyun said that money was important, but she should always remember that her health came first. In his opinion, she always worked too hard, and Kang replied that she was working just enough not to worry him. He was too kind to her. If her boss were even half as good as he was, she wouldn't be in such a disastrous situation right now. As she said that, suddenly she received several messages telling her to prepare client meeting documents and bring them to his apartment by 7. This made the protagonist tense with irritation, annoyed, because he really was a pain to deal with. The next day, however, the protagonist returned to her perfect secretary performance to meet Isiop in the morning. She greeted him with a smile, but he responded that she was 30 minutes late, which was obviously a provocation. Kang said she arrived on time, but the front door's password had changed, drawing an innocent look from him as if wondering why. The protagonist said she adjusted the schedule so it wouldn't affect the workday, frustrated internally because that idiot Isiop had changed the password to make her late. In response, Isiop simply ignored that, hearing from her that whenever he was ready, she could report the day's schedule, and he turned around, mentioned he was tired because he had just woken up. To this, she replied that she had anticipated something like that happening and had prepared his breakfast. Seeing this made Isiop grimace, raising his hand to say that he only drank coffee made from Kenyan beans prepared in a specific, well-balanced way. Dismissing her effort and ordering her to get rid of that coffee, pointing to the other side of the apartment to throw it out. Despite being irritated, Kang asked about the meeting for the day, and he yawned, saying he needed to rest a little more. She reminded him that Director Tae was waiting for him, but Isiop seemed uninterested in going to see Junsup, complaining about being up so early. At that, he told her to cancel the meeting, which made Kang start to tremble with rage, thinking she had only been a secretary for 2 days. For the first time in her 10-year career, she felt her patience being truly tested, but even so, she agreed with Isiop's words. Later, the two went to Isiop's office, where the protagonist reported that it would take some time to establish ownership of TK Electronics. But the reorganization of TK Corporation was on schedule. The next steps were logistics, construction, trade, and the resort, along with TK Fashion. Sighing, Isiop said that she had left the presentation for TK Fashion last, which was the biggest headache of all. TK Fashion was the foundation of the TK group, but its consistently poor performance had become the group's greatest headache. Remembering this, Isiop questioned how he could be forced to deal with that business. The sales were slow, and there were talks of selling the division. It was far too difficult to find ways to fix it quickly, shouting that he had worked all these years just for Junsup to take all the divisions that actually made money, while he was stuck with the problematic leftovers. He didn't even want to work, frustrated because all he wanted was to leave everything behind. This was not good news for Kang. It was obvious that Isiop wasn't motivated to work at all. Watching this pitiful scene, she wondered how she was supposed to work with someone so unmotivated. What had happened to the determined Isiop she had met during training, who was always at the forefront of everything? And even though he always seemed like a big jerk to the protagonist, back then, he at least seemed somewhat worthy of the title of heir. At least, that's how it seemed to her, watching from the outside, always so busy and working hard for his goals and future. Now the protagonist stayed quiet, watching Isiop, which made him ask if she had just thought he was doing something wrong. She stammered that it wasn't the case, remembering she should maintain her composure as a secretary during her work there. At that, Isiop commented that she must have thought that before she was a rising senior manager, but now she had to work with Isiop Ter, who was going nowhere. She stammered that it wasn't true, and she hadn't thought that at all, that it was an honor to help him with his work. Standing up, Isiop stared at Kang and approached her, who remained silent until she heard him say that her lips were dry. Leaning in, he remarked that she should at least find a way to moisten her lips before lying like that in front of him. After that, he turned back to the desk where he was sitting, telling her not to do it again, then stretching with a yawn. Meanwhile, Kang blushed, touching her own lips, her heart pounding after that sudden closeness and those words, wondering if she would really be okay there. 10 years in the past, the new employees of the 53rd class were warmly welcomed into the TK family. As everyone clapped during the event while the announcer narrated, Isiop watched the protagonist standing next to him. She was the girl who had surpassed him as the best new employee of the company, and after learning about that, his grandfather told him to keep an eye on her during the workshop, to assess if she had potential as someone trustworthy or if she was just too smart for her own good. That's what his grandfather said, but even during the times they spent in the workshop, Isiop didn't want to think about Kang for too long. While walking through the corridors of the workshop, people always talked about Isiop, wondering if he was some kind of model and how he was the heir who had it all. When he noticed people talking about him and smiled, Isiop always managed to make the girls smile happily because they had gotten his attention. He was used to receiving that kind of attention from women. They couldn't even look directly at his face before becoming embarrassed and walking away. But it was a type of attention that wasn't welcome to him. In fact, Isiop always thought it was all a huge annoyance. That's why, when he could walk in quiet places, it felt like he could finally breathe away from the commotion of the other students. It was too exhausting to maintain a perfect image all the time, until one day, he saw Kang walking by while reading. He stayed silent when she noticed his presence, and then she smiled at him, catching him off guard because Kang didn't look away. In fact, she made direct eye contact without hesitation, but she didn't stop or rush. She just walked past him naturally. However, for some reason, Isiop felt offended by that reaction, and he still remembered those times. When he woke up from a small nap in his office, he wondered what kind of dream that was. Then he heard voices outside saying they were coming in, knocking on the door to announce it, and despite Isiop asking her to wait, Kang burst into the office cheerfully, bringing documents that needed his approval, irritating him because she always came in before getting permission. Even so, he paused, staring at Kang, remembering the person he knew from the past in the workshop, and went silent. Well, Kang said she thought he might be sleeping, so she couldn't wait outside any longer. She tossed several papers and documents onto his desk, which were reports on the current resort project, and he started to say it wasn't necessary. Until Isiop stopped, realizing that Kang had organized all the data perfectly. It was incredibly easy to read. Noticing he was impressed, he threw the papers on the desk and told her to stop overdoing it. She could work as hard as she wanted, but it didn't mean anything, and no one cared. It wasn't like the company couldn't function without him, but Kang disagreed, saying that Executive Director Isiop was an essential part of TK Corporation. Every employee at TK knew about the things he had done for the company over the past 10 years, and she wanted to say once again how much of an honor it was to see him in action. Her words silenced him before he looked away and agreed that she could leave now. He would take another look at the report later. The protagonist agreed and asked him to let her know if he needed anything, then left his office. Later, Junseop laughed, saying he finally had the chance to see Iseop's face after so long, and questioned what had happened because Iseop had said earlier he wouldn't work. The executives were delighted that he was back, saying he was doing a great job, to which Iseop responded that it wasn't his work, it was Kang's. Laughing, Junseop said he always knew she was a great idea as his secretary, and Iseop questioned how he managed to transfer her. He should know better than anyone that Kang was too good to be just an ordinary secretary working like this. Junseop laughed again and asked if Iseop really didn't know. He should have investigated over the past few days, at least talked to advertising manager in Mokyu. Then he mentioned that Kang's twin brothers, university ice skating athletes Muwon and Minjin, were being sponsored. This made Iseop suspicious, as based on their grades, they didn't seem qualified for it, and Junseop replied that the sponsorship was based on their potential. That made Iseop go quiet before asking if they were doing this just to keep her as his secretary, and Junseop retorted that no one ever told him to leave work and travel abroad like that. They needed someone of her caliber to compensate for Iseop's absence. From what he had discovered, Kang's parents ran a modest mangacap restaurant and her twins were athletes, which must have been financially tough for them. If the offer came from Songbakje, it probably meant Kang wasn't in a position to refuse the proposal to work as a secretary. That almost irritated Iseop, but Junseop asserted that Kang was doing an excellent job as his assistant at the moment, so he didn't see the problem with keeping her around now. After all, Iseop knew her background, so it shouldn't bother him. This made Iseop pause to reflect on whether he was really that conflicted about Kang, and slowly he denied it, saying that wasn't the case. Still, he touched his arm, remembering how she had grabbed his arm in the same way earlier. He just didn't expect to feel that desperation in her touch and see her pleading eyes, searching for a way to maintain that situation. She made him a little uncomfortable. That must have been it, or at least that's what Iseop wanted to believe when he thought about Kang. On another day, Iseop was calmly sitting in his office one afternoon as the sunlight shone through the windows. It was a time to quietly enjoy a cup of coffee without any commitments or major concerns on a comfortable sofa. Until he started hearing hurried, firm footsteps coming down the hall, and he quickly widened his eyes as he sensed the anxiety in those steps. Turning around, sweating nervously, as Kang suddenly opened the door and called for Iseop, asking if he had enjoyed his meal, making him yell in fright. With his hand on his heart, which was beating wildly, he stared at the protagonist, who said she would now start with the afternoon schedule summary, catching him completely off guard when she began rambling non-stop. It didn't take long for Iseop to start complaining to Kim about how every day felt like he was in a suspense movie. Just the sound of her heels cracking from afar was enough to make his heart race, as if she were a haunting presence. For him to give his approval on things, her heels were terrifying to that point, and Iseop always found himself trembling as he heard her approach. It was scary how Kang never left him alone, not even for a second, and even though he was her boss, he was still afraid of his secretary. Hearing these complaints, Kim smiled and replied that that was just Manager Kang's way, always full of passion and determination. Sighing, Iseop could only imagine that Kim's car was the only place where he could truly relax. Until the car started receiving a call from Manager Kang, and Kim cheerfully announced who was calling, startling Iseop. Even though Iseop told him not to answer, Kim did so anyway, making Iseop whisper to Kim not to mention he was there, although the protagonist could hear him perfectly well. She knew he had no plans outside the office that day, and he stammered that it couldn't be because he had something to do. But it was impossible for there to be something Kang didn't know about him, and she stated that he had a pile of work to do now and couldn't get distracted. So, she asked if she could call him back later, and Iseop stammered that no, he was busy, which made her smile and reply that she would be waiting for him at the office. Despite saying that, Kang always complained to Lee about how rude Iseop was, only returning much later than the scheduled time to leave. Sighing, she wondered if he was a child, with Lee comforting her because she had to endure so many things in her job. At her apartment, they received a visit from Hyun, who came straight from work to see them because he missed them. Lee joked that Hyun must have been eager for the protagonist's mother's cooking, which he agreed to with a laugh. This made Kang pack several things her mother had sent for him to eat, although he only wanted a little to satisfy his craving. She said it was fine because her mother had made a large portion, even for herself, so Hyun could enjoy his share this time. They talked about how it seemed like everyone was quite busy, even Hyun, but maybe not as much as Kang herself. Hyun commented that he had heard Lee was planning to go on a blind date the next day, which shocked her, making her ask how he knew about that. He mentioned that he knew she was meeting the director of Hospital J because they attended the same elementary school, catching Lee by surprise once again. As Hyun continued explaining, he said he found out when the director messaged him about it 3 days ago. He said he had tried to talk to Lee, but she just responded coldly, so the director asked Hyun if he had done something wrong. Still nervous, Lee asked if she had done something wrong, and if he had said anything else, and Hyun mentioned that the director had only asked what she liked, to which Hyun replied that she enjoyed the French restaurant at Hotel M, and that she was very stylish and cute, which made the protagonist think for a moment, feeling a bit tense beside them. Then Lee started pushing her brother out of the house, laughing nervously as she shoved him out, saying they were going to sleep now. Though he didn't understand anything, Hyun agreed and asked the protagonist to tell her mother he was grateful as Lee closed the door in his face. Sweating nervously, the protagonist asked what they had just done, and Lee nervously said everything would be fine, even though they both knew it wasn't fine at all, because 3 days ago, Lee had asked Kang to go on a blind date at an expensive restaurant. It was the French restaurant at Hotel M, which Kang knew was her friend's favorite, but she stammered that it was a great atmosphere. In response, the protagonist wasn't very excited, asking who cared about the atmosphere when going on a blind date. Still, Lee begged her friend for help, asking her to go in her place. It was the last concert Lee wanted to attend before her boys enlisted in the army. If she missed that concert, she would never have the chance to see them again, and she knew how hard it was to get those tickets. Lee said her mother wouldn't arrange any more blind dates like that as she went on this one now. So she begged Kang to go in her place in exchange for cooking and cleaning for a month, but the protagonist didn't even want any of that. After begging for so long, Kang finally gave in to the request because it would only be a 1-hour date. Thus, Lee, a fashion editor with 8 years of experience, would be replaced by Kang, who knew nothing about fashion and wore cheap, reused clothes. It was impossible for Kang to pretend to be Lee, but her friend assured her there was nothing to worry about, because she was a fashion expert and would fix this visual problem in just a few minutes. So, she promised to transform Kang into the perfect Lee with her skills, or rather, she would turn her into a completely new Kang. Time passed until the dinner with the director of Hospital J finally arrived, and Lee was excited because she would get to see her favorite idols at the concert. She looked at the protagonist and asked if she was ready to go on the date, at least mentally, and Kang nervously agreed. Lee eagerly started the visual transformation on her friend and pulled her to start getting her ready. She sat her down to begin her work, bringing in a special guest to do her makeup for the day. It was fun for Lee to imitate beauty gurus, so she always spoke and played around like that, smiling as she'd ask Kang if she was ready for a makeover. Showing off an organic emulsion for sensitive skin, a soothing, radiant, illuminating toner with snail essence. First, she would start with skincare, touching Kang's face and complimenting her on her great skin, even though the protagonist had no idea what was being done. Time passed as Lee worked on Kang's face, hair, and everything necessary to complete the full transformation. Not long after, when the protagonist looked at herself in the mirror, she gasped in surprise because she'd barely recognized herself. This made Lee smile, saying it was too early to be impressed. Now they could move on to the real final version, which was the process of dressing her. Meanwhile, at Hotel M, Kim mentioned it had been some time since he had driven him to a certain personal engagement, to meet up with his elementary school friends, which should be fun because it had been a while since Iseop had seen his friends. So, after dropping him off, Kim wished him a good event, and Iseop thanked him for driving him that weekend. He continued walking after receiving a message to head to the lounge bar, and so he walked, looking for the place, until he finally found it, while Kang was lost because she would never know where such a place was since she had never been to a place like that, making her late. The two followed different paths, and it didn't take long for Kang to meet the son of hospital director Jae, Jong Yu-jung, who smiled because he had heard she was cute, so he thought she would be small, but in reality, she was tall and beautiful. The compliments made the protagonist smile, thanking him while agreeing that she was enjoying the restaurant's food, though a bit nervously. She was so nervous, in fact, that she wasn't even sure if the food was going into her mouth or her nose. Her fork barely touched the food properly. Lee had said she only needed to stay for an hour, so she just had to wait for 10 more minutes until the date ended. Then Jung asked if it would be okay to take her to the lounge bar on the top floor of a hotel. The lounge bar was very famous for its cocktail, Seoul Night. People said it was a fitting name because it had an excellent taste while you gazed at the city's night lights. She covered her mouth with a smile, apologizing because, despite it sounding tempting, she still had to work the next day. Later, she left with a sigh of relief because it was finally over. The makeup had been uncomfortable since she wasn't used to wearing it regularly, and the contact lenses were drying out her eyes, so she decided to take them off and toss them in the trash. Despite that, she remembered that Lee had booked a night at Hotel M to enjoy the stay and had left everything ready for her to take advantage of. One night, plus a free cocktail without any refund. Though she was still worried because she had to work the next day, it was quite the conflict. As she headed to the hotel, Kang paused to admire the place, realizing she had worked a lot in the past few months and didn't know when she would have the chance to enjoy a place like this again. She had also dressed up just for this day. At the very least, she could enjoy this night as Kang. Meanwhile, Asiop was drinking with his elementary school friends and chatting about various things as he sipped on wine. One of them asked why he still wasn't dating, surprising Asiop because they had brought up the topic so suddenly. The friend laughed, saying there wouldn't be another opportunity to talk about it, and they asked if Asiop planned to stay single forever, making him freeze. As the others commented that he didn't have a potential marriage partner, maybe the daughter of some professor. However, Asiop asked why they were all so interested in his personal life at this point. There must be something more interesting than the life of an heir in his 30s with zero dating experience. This made them all laugh at Asiop, toasting and wishing him luck to finally find a girlfriend. Despite Isiop's embarrassment, he watched as they opened a bottle of champagne and toasted together. They seemed more excited than Isiop himself about the idea of him dating and getting married at this age. He simply decided to take another sip of his drink until he began hearing footsteps in the hallway that gave him a familiar chill. When he looked up, he saw Kang walking nearby, completely capturing his attention. She walked right past him, but Isiop instantly recognized her as Kang because of her distinct footsteps. Even so, he felt like he was losing his mind seeing Kang in a place like this so suddenly. He grabbed his phone, thinking he should send her a message, and then he wrote a few texts. This made Kang pick up her phone and read them, surprising Isiop again because it was really her in front of him. A few days ago, he remembered complaining to Kim about Kang's terrible phone charm, featuring a ridiculous character that looked like an onion. She had to be the only one with such a bad phone charm, and Kang responded to the messages, saying she would be at his apartment the next day. As soon as Kang touched her phone, Isiop received an immediate reply, still making him sweat in shock. He could hardly believe that Kang was this stunning woman on the other side of the room, and his friends quickly noticed that he was staring at someone. Pointing to the woman across the way who looked like a model, they teased Isiop, saying he seemed interested in her, laughing that it must be love at first sight. Isiop told them to shut up, saying the woman just looked like someone he knew. Meanwhile, Kang sat down to look at the menu, remembering Jung mentioning that the bar was famous for its cocktail. Thinking that it sounded delicious, she decided to try the drink, buying it and figuring she could handle the alcohol. After all, she was staying at the hotel, so she could just enjoy the night a little, sipping the cocktail while listening to the music playing in the lounge, watching the night outside the window as she sat alone at the table, smiling at her own reflection as she felt quite good about herself that evening. That's when she was caught off guard by Jung showing up again, nervously laughing as he said he went to get a drink and thought he'd like to see her again. The compliments made the protagonist nervous because she had already ordered a drink, and it was strange since she couldn't drink much more than that. Still, Jung sat down with her to chat at the table, and Isiop noticed this from across the room, wondering what was happening. It didn't seem like the man was Kang's boyfriend based on how they were acting, and meanwhile, Jung ordered more drinks. The Purple Rain, which women liked for its great fragrance, and a Sunset, which had a base of deep sweet whiskey, serving them all so Kang could drink and enjoy, filling the table with alcohol. Jung mentioned that he really wanted to buy those drinks for her, revealing that he had read all the columns she had published. She always wrote that she loved cocktails, usually ordering at least 3 at bars, which made the protagonist break into a cold sweat because she had completely forgotten that Lee loved to drink. It would be better to just drink them quickly and leave, but to her dismay, Jung kept talking while she drank. excited because he had studied all night just to go out with Lee, not knowing that Kang was actually having trouble drinking the strong cocktails. That's when Jung got a call from Hyeon, stepping out to say that he was with Lee now, laughing because Hyeon seemed worried about his sister. Not only that, but he was also at the hotel and on his way there, even though Jung was about to take her home. The conversation made Kang anxious, realizing she needed to find a way to leave before Hyeon arrived and discovered the truth. Jung returned to the table and apologized, saying it was rude of him to take the call and leave her aside. Noticing she still had a drink, he suggested they enjoy it slowly while chatting, and Kang thought that if this was the last one, she needed to finish it quickly. Seeing her drink so much made Jung laugh, commenting that she was really good at drinking, as expected, but soon she found herself starting to feel the effects of the alcohol. Everything seemed to sway in her vision, worrying Jung as she began to feel dizzy. The protagonist stood up, saying she was going to leave, but Jung mentioned that Hyeon was on his way, and they could wait for him. She wanted to get to her room as quickly as possible. It was bad because, despite wanting to leave, Jung kept insisting she sit back down. Seeing the scene, Aseop approached them and questioned why Jung was trying to stop someone from leaving like that. This made Jung break into a cold sweat and stammer that it wasn't what it looked like, that Aseop had misunderstood, which made Kang feel that the voice was familiar to her. But she couldn't recognize his face because she was too drunk, everything felt too stuffy, and she wasn't feeling well. Aseop said he had been sitting nearby and saw everything, noticing how Jung had joined her even though she clearly didn't want to be there, and he was forcing her to drink, so Aseop asked what Jung's real intentions were. Jung defended himself, saying nothing had happened, and even wanted to show his card. But Aseop was caught off guard when Kang stumbled and leaned against his chest, making her look up at his face more closely. As he woke up the next morning in bed, at least remembering that he had met Kang the night before, he went to the bathroom to wash his face and wake up, wondering what had happened, the closeness catching him off guard and making him blush, causing him to look away. Then he took off his jacket and covered her with it, making sure to hide her skin, even though Kang was still confused and searching for her briefing document. It seemed to Aseop that she wasn't in her right mind, and Kang apologized while suddenly looking for the document. This made Aseop wonder how much Jung had made her drink that night, and Jung stammered that he hadn't done anything, explaining they were on a date with a view to a future marriage, showing his business card, and promising that he wasn't a suspicious or strange guy, surprising Aseop because she was really on a date. Jung accused Aseop of being rude for intruding like that, to which Aseop asked who he was to say that. Aseop replied that he was a colleague of Kang's, crumpling Jung's business card while staring him down. Kang stammered, wanting to explain, accidentally dropping the jacket, and Aseop bent down to pick it up, sighing for her to compose herself a little. Then he was once again caught off guard when Kang also bent down to pick up the jacket, exposing more of her body than she should have. This made him blush even more as he wrapped her body in the jacket, yelling at her to cover up properly. He wondered why she had drunk so much to the point of being so careless, not even aware of what she was doing. At that moment, Jung asked who exactly Kang was and what colleague Aseop was talking about. Then suddenly, Hyeon appeared, answering that she was Lee's best friend and his roommate. Jung was caught off guard by everything that had happened, and the conversation between the two made him bid farewell and leave everything in Hyeon's hands. Meanwhile, Aseop wondered who this man was who had appeared so suddenly, but Hyeon approached the executive director. Bowing to apologize for the commotion, he explained that he had been assigned as a legal consultant for TK Corporation, but hadn't expected to meet Aseop like this. When Kang looked up, it took her a moment to recognize Hyeon, freezing as she wondered what exactly he was doing there. Then she remembered that she could be in trouble if she got caught, but she hadn't realized she'd already been caught in the act. With that, the protagonist turned to hide behind Aseop, grabbing his hand in a way that made him blush again. He wondered what was happening now, but noticed that Kang seemed as nervous as the last time. Hyeon smiled, noticing that Kang was too drunk, but said he would take care of her from now on and take her home. However, Aseop interrupted, saying she was his employee and that he couldn't hand her over to a stranger just like that. He asked what the relationship between them was, to which Hyeon replied that they had been close friends since they were young, so there was no need to worry. He reached out to bring Kang closer, promising he wouldn't say anything to Lee about what happened and that everything would be fine. He reminded Kang that she knew she shouldn't drink so much, making her laugh as she said it had been about 3 cocktails followed by champagne. It was an expression that left Aseop speechless, He had never seen her make that kind of face or smile before. Once again, Hyan apologized to Iceup for all the trouble, saying he could introduce himself formally next time. With that, he took the jacket off the protagonist to hand it back to Iceup, but Iceup interrupted. He covered her again, this time properly, buttoning the jacket to ensure Kang was fully covered while she just watched. Iceup said they should bring her back tomorrow, but Kang said nothing as Hyan placed his hand on her shoulder, thanking him for taking care of the protagonist. He pulled her close so they could leave, which irritated Iceup in a way he didn't expect. But Kang refused, saying she wasn't going home because she wanted to stay and have fun that night, laughing a little. Hyan agreed, saying he would take her to her room, surprising Iceup because he hadn't expected him to take her to the hotel. Iceup grabbed Hyan's arm, questioning why he was taking a drunk girl to a hotel room. It was far too strange. After a moment of hesitation, Hyan asked if Iceup thought it would be better for him to take her himself. After all, it wasn't like they were dating for him to defend her like this. The next morning, when Iceup woke up, he wondered if his encounter with Kang at the bar had been a dream or reality. He got up to wash his face in the bathroom, still wondering what had happened after she and Hyan had left. Supposedly, Hyan, a close friend, had walked her to her hotel room, and Iceup could still remember Hyan smiling as he said Iceup was being hypocritical. As he dressed, Iceup tried to convince himself that none of this was his business, ready to head to work. When they met in the car with Kim, Kang smiled as she greeted him, and he hesitated before acknowledging her. Seeing her like this made Iceup think that it must have been a good night for Kang. She didn't even have a hangover. Moreover, she didn't seem to have any trouble looking at him, but Iceup didn't want to look at Kang's face or hear her voice. It was annoying, but he didn't even know why he was always irritated by the protagonist's presence. When they arrived at the office, time passed until lunchtime, when Kang appeared to report that the food was ready. After a moment of silence, he responded that he wasn't hungry and turned his face away, also asking her to cancel all afternoon meetings because he wasn't feeling well. Kang agreed, leaving the office while thinking that she needed to return the jacket to Iceup somehow. She cringed, feeling like she was losing her mind after everything she did the night before, blushing as she wondered if she should pretend she didn't remember, or if she should face it and apologize, but it seemed like her boss didn't want to see her that day. It was both worrying and understandable, making her even more embarrassed than before. It was a distance that left both of them tense. Later, Iceup got into Kim's car, asking just to drive around for a bit, and as he rested his head against the window, he sighed. Kim said he would take him toward the river, suggesting that it might be good to get some fresh air through the window while they drove. This caught Iceup's attention, making him ask if he looked unwell, to which Kim responded that he always called when something was on his mind. That's why Kim thought about where he could take him to help him relax, making Iceup pause and think about how quickly the manager understood things. Then Kim mentioned that it was Kang who had told him there was nothing better than running along the Han River when something was weighing on your mind. This surprised Iceup, learning that Kang ran, and Kim confirmed it, revealing that Kang enjoyed exercising for fun, running 10 kilometers every time she went out. In addition, she found time to work out even with her busy schedule, which made Iceup feel impressed. It took him a moment to realize he was blushing, and he shouted at Kim to drive more quietly because he was talking too much, making Kim apologize. Later that evening, Iceup ended up joining a family dinner at home, catching his younger sister, Sujin-tae, by surprise. This made Iceup comment that, based on how she spoke, it seemed like he was the only one who was always disappearing, and he questioned what Junsup was doing in Songbakche. Junsup replied that he and Wookyong were engaged, so he wanted to see President Tai to discuss a few things. Sujin explained in surprise and praised Junsup for being engaged, telling Iceup that it was wonderful news. They had even appeared on magazine covers, which she thought was very romantic, but to Iceup, it all seemed like cliché romantic nonsense. Sighing, his sister felt sorry for him because Iceup had worked his whole life and had never dated, which pained her. That made him tense up, and he glared at her, asking if she was trying to irritate him, and she laughed, saying she was just worried about him. He got up to get some fresh air, but before leaving, he said he wanted to talk to Junsup outside. The two went out to the garden, and Junsup opened a beer, commenting that it was a warm night. Iceup was startled to see him not only start drinking, but almost down the beer in one gulp, to the point where it spilled down his neck. This made Iseop think Junseop was a fool. It was obvious his throat must have burned after that. Then Junseop mentioned that Sujin had told him women found it sexy to drink like that, but Iseop couldn't believe it. In any case, he got straight to the point, saying he had something to discuss with Junseop about manager Kang. He wanted him to take her back on his team. Immediately, Junseop smiled and refused his request, surprising Iseop because he didn't even ask why. Junseop replied that they had hired excellent staff and Kang was someone who did an incredible job, so there was no reason to bring her back to his team. Iseop looked away and said that Junseop should know Kang was too good to be just a secretary, which made Junseop smile because she was perfect for the job. But Junseop wanted to know if there was some other issue with Kang that Iseop wasn't telling him, which made Iseop go silent. The next morning, Sujin burst into her brother's room, shouting and calling him over to show him the news, photos of him with Kang, suggesting they were having an affair. She smiled and asked what that was all about, but Iseop didn't even know what was happening as Sujin told him he had been caught with an unknown woman. Known for staying out of the public eye, Iseop had suddenly been seen in a hotel bar with a woman who wasn't a celebrity. Pressing her brother even more with a big grin, she asked who this woman was, forcing him to sit down. But before he could say anything, Sujin decided to guess that it was manager Kang, making Iseop blush and ask how she knew. Sujin burst out laughing, saying she didn't know. She had just taken a guess and hit the mark, but she was surprised because she never thought she'd see her brother with a woman in his arms. He didn't even like people touching him, so it was unbelievable that something like this had happened, leading her to guess that it might be the start of an office romance. Iseop denied it, saying it wasn't true, though Sujin insisted otherwise, reminding him that he needed some romance in his life too. That's why she pressed him to know if he was interested in anyone. He had to find someone to date, flirt with, and everything else. When her brother kept denying it, Sujin theorized that he might seriously be considering an arranged marriage with her. An arranged marriage that, as their parents said, would bring harmony between the TK and Choi families and establish him as the rightful heir. Sujin asked if that was why he had never slept with anyone before, making Iseop shout again that it wasn't anything like that. Shrinking back, he said he had no interest in an arranged marriage, but that didn't mean he wanted to date just anyone. Blushing, Iseop stammered that he would date someone he fell in love with at first sight, making his sister laugh even harder at the scene. Still teasing Iseop, Sujin called him the most sensitive man in the world, with a pure heart and everything, despite him trying to hide it. The two argued for a long time until Sujin winked, wishing luck for Iseop's romance, and thanking him for her allowance, as always. After she left, Iseop was left alone, still blushing with embarrassment from all his sister's teasing. The next day, Kang apologized to Iseop for the inconvenience she had caused in his personal life the other night. Her formality made Iseop a little nervous, and he responded awkwardly that there wasn't anything to apologize for. It was his mistake for getting involved in her personal matters. However, the protagonist disagreed, saying that as his secretary, she failed to prevent something ridiculous, false, and cowardly from happening, so it was entirely her fault. She was serious about doing everything in her power to ensure nothing would tarnish his status as an executive director after that article went live. That's why she bowed several times, clearly embarrassed, even though Iseop assured her that everything was fine. He changed the subject to the meeting scheduled with a construction company, and he got ready to leave while she went to prepare the car. The two took the elevator down, and Iseop wondered if what had happened really warranted such repeated apologies. Deep down, it seemed that for Kang, everything was just part of the job, simply another matter she needed to handle. She was just doing her job as a secretary, which made him question what exactly he had been expecting. When they stepped out of the elevator, they were suddenly met by a swarm of photographers flashing their cameras at them. The sudden attention made Iseop freeze, his heart racing with nervousness, anxiety, and discomfort. Kang quickly noticed this and rushed to waken from his shock, grabbing his shoulders when she saw him stumble and cover his face. She became worried as he turned pale and started gasping for air, trembling badly in the midst of a panic attack that made him feel like throwing up. This made her tense too. Of all times, this had to happen right now. That's when Kim appeared, speeding toward them with the car and yelling for them to get in quickly, which they did. The car sped away from the building, with Kang still trying to calm Iseop, asking if he was okay. He could barely breathe, so she urged him to at least try, though her voice seemed to grow more distant. It didn't take long for Isiop to pass out in her arms, still sweating heavily after the panic attack. In his memories, Isiop could recall when, as a child, TK had been passed down to him, and the entire world had its eyes on him. That's why, throughout his life, he had been haunted by the flashes of cameras blinding his eyes. Pictures were taken of him every day, with no sense of privacy or space to live his own life. He was ordered to always behave, never to let his guard down. He was the face of TK, the future of the company. The bright lights had always made him anxious and nervous ever since he was a child, and this time was no different. Unconscious, he could hear a voice calling his name repeatedly until he finally woke up with a start. Sitting up slowly in bed, he sighed as he realized that he had fainted and ended up in the hospital. Even though he thought he had gotten better, it seemed he was still struggling, which reminded him of how scared and worried Kang had been. He noticed her sitting on a nearby couch, fast asleep after spending her time there with him. This made him wonder if Kang had stayed by his side the entire time, even staying so late, and she surely must have been exhausted. It wasn't long before Kang woke up too, startled when she realized Isiop had gotten up. She helped him sit back down, warning him that he shouldn't get up yet and needed to rest, though he insisted he was fine. Isiop told her to go home now because she must be tired, but the protagonist refused, saying it was her fault for not taking care of his health, so she would stay. After all, he had been skipping his meals lately, and she would make sure he ate well before she left. That startled Isiop. She was acting like he was a child, but she didn't mind and went off to get him something to eat. Kang knew the meal probably wasn't to his taste, but he had to eat everything, which made him grimace. She told him that she had ensured everything that happened that day remained confidential, so there was nothing to worry about. Slowly he thanked her, and then he heard her stomach growling, which made Isiop chuckle a little while she blushed with embarrassment. He asked her to go out and get dinner now because he wouldn't eat until she returned with something for herself to eat. When the two sat down to eat, Isiop commented that he had thought she was a robot, but now he could see her messy hair and the fact that she was eating too. It seemed she had a human side as well, which made her reply that she would fix it, though Isiop quickly explained that it wasn't a criticism, just an observation. Slowly, he started to share that the first time he fainted was when he was 20 years old. His father had always been very demanding, and ever since he was young, he was told he had to be perfect and composed all the time. Reporters followed him, always trying to find something to write about, so his father wanted him to be cautious, and he always was. So, Isiop lived with constant anxiety, never taking the risk of tarnishing the company's image because of something he said or did. The reporters were constantly following him, waiting for any mistake, bombarding him with blinding flashes from their cameras. At one point, he thought he would get used to the flashes, but even as time passed, that never happened. One day, during a family photo session, a flash went off right in front of his eyes, and suddenly he collapsed, fainting on the spot. After telling this story, he gestured and smiled at Kang, suggesting that they should rest for a while. Isiop felt a little embarrassed for talking so much and asked her to continue eating, which made her fall silent. She thought that Isiop had been through much more than she had ever imagined before. Sometime later, she said she would return at 8 a.m. with the preparations for the morning's video conference. This made Isiop check his watch, commenting that it was already too late, and it seemed too early to do this the next day. Kang replied that the schedule had been pushed back the day before, so it would be difficult to reschedule. The documents were all ready, so there was nothing to worry about. But before she could leave, he mentioned that there were only a few hours until the meeting, so she might as well sleep there. However, even he didn't know what he was thinking when he suggested that, leaving the protagonist confused, and he quickly gestured for her to go. He was still blushing when he watched her leave, holding his head, and wondering if he had hit it when he fainted or something. The next day, he woke up still feeling tired, even though he had slept well, barely finishing a yawn when he heard Kang knocking on the door. She appeared smiling and guided him to the day's meeting as planned. Isiop watched her, thinking it was impressive because, even though Kang was surely tired, she didn't show it. She seemed the same as always, while Isiop didn't feel that way at all. He ended up saying a lot of unnecessary things the day before, even though it wasn't like him to be so emotional. When Kang finished, she informed him that the morning meetings had been rescheduled, clearing his agenda for the rest of the day to allow for his recovery. At this, he stammered out a thank you, and not long after, he received a visit from Sujin, who had heard he was off for the day. She arrived to deliver a bouquet of flowers, under orders from their mother, who insisted on visiting him since he was in the hospital. Hearing that his mother knew about it made Isiop freeze, and his sister nodded, explaining that she had gone to Busan to get medicinal herbs. As the two conversed, the protagonist smiled, noticing how close Isiop was to his family. When Sujin approached to greet her, Kang greeted her formally, and Sujin remarked that she had seen her before at the employee competitions, praising her for finishing first. Beside them, Isiop crossed his arms and told Sujin to leave now, that she had done what she came for. But his sister refused and pulled him aside, whispering that she would help him, or maybe she would just spill a secret, leaving him confused. Still, Sujin approached Kang again, smiling and suggesting they go out for coffee, leaving Isiop alone in the room. The two walked down the streets with coffee in hand, and Sujin commented that Kang must have been shocked the previous day. The protagonist agreed, saying she never expected to see him faint like that, but it was a relief to see him better today. Still, Sujin added that seeing Isiop faint wasn't uncommon. She had never actually seen her brother relax. Since they were young, their parents had always expected Isiop to become the perfect successor and role model. Their father was an ambitious man, but lacked the skills to achieve his goals, which led him to fall out of favor with their grandfather, Siwon. To regain his position at TK, he began using his eldest son, Isiop, who always worked hard to meet expectations and earn recognition. When Isiop turned 20, that's when Jun Kang appeared, now also known as Junseop Ta. Sujin commented that Kang probably knew Junseop's story, and Kang remembered that it made a lot of headlines at the time. Siwon Tae's youngest daughter, Seovi Ta, had fallen in love with a volleyball player, ran away to America, and disappeared. No one heard her for 20 years, until the existence of her son was revealed after her death. After the aunt who had been hiding in America passed away from leukemia, Junseop had nowhere to go, so Siwon accepted him as his grandson. That's how he received his current name, and for Isiop, who considered himself the only heir, it was like a sudden threat appearing. So, he worked hard for 20 years to avoid losing to Junseop, up until recently, when their father's mistake handed half of the company to Junseop's side. For Isiop, it must have felt like his whole world had turned upside down. This made the protagonist realize she had always jumped to conclusions about Isiop, thinking of him only as a spoiled heir. At that point, Sujin said that her brother hadn't even had a chance to rest before starting to work, and he was under immense stress. That's why she was relieved that Kang was by Isiop's side now, and she looked at her expectantly, as if wanting to call her by her first name. The protagonist agreed, thinking that it was such a sad story that it even reminded her of her own twin brothers. That's when Sujin hugged Kang, whining that her brother was an idiot who didn't know how to relax and was still working while in the hospital. Still crying, she asked what they could do to get Isiop to loosen up and relax a bit, which made the protagonist hesitate, as she had a weakness for women's tears. Determined to find a way to fix the situation, Kang resolved to help, which made Sujin celebrate, knowing she had achieved her goal. As they left the hospital, with everyone in the car, Kim confidently stated that he was an expert in travel and that they could leave everything in his hands. Isiop didn't understand why they were suddenly traveling to Gangwon, despite Sujin's pleased smile. At this, the protagonist said that proper rest was excellent for recovery, as well as improving productivity and creativity, which would benefit his work. That's why she wanted to help him rest, which made Isiop hesitate before agreeing, looking away as he muttered that he only needed a few days of sleep and that a trip was over the top. Still, Kang smiled because, despite his complaints, he seemed quite excited from her point of view. This made her feel a bit sorry for Isiop, thinking that he must have worked way too hard for him to end up in this situation. That's why she was now determined to make sure he, and she herself, enjoyed this trip together. Driver Kim had gone through various stages in his life, from elementary to secondary school and high school, serving as the president of the entertainment club. He had been a representative at Jongdaeng University in the automotive engineering department, the president of a self-made automotive club, and much more. The protagonist recognized his efforts and everything he had accomplished throughout his life, which is why she chose him as the driver for this trip. He had even booked excellent accommodations, prompting Kang to thank him for organizing the itinerary for everyone. Isiop was confused by how far they were traveling, and Sujin laughed, saying the fewer people around, the better. eagerly anticipating the future events. They headed to the Jayam Sok Pension in the Jayu Aramdon Hills at the Healing Pension of Freedom, a nearly 5-star location. People always said it was one of the best accommodations in the area, offering a beautiful view of nature. Another reviewer mentioned it was a perfect family trip, ideal for relaxation, and they thanked the place for providing everything in advance. They had reserved the highest-rated room, and even Kim was impressed because the accommodations looked exactly like the photos. He presented the girls' room and the identical one for the men, pointing out how spacious it was, with the beautiful natural scenery as a bonus. A bit taken aback, Aesop asked if the 4 of them were really going to sleep there, and Kim agreed, saying the room was indeed large enough for 4 people. They then started unpacking from the trip. During the process, Aesop thought it was a bit strange to share a room, as he couldn't handle the idea of sleeping with someone close by, thinking he wouldn't be able to rest properly like that. Meanwhile, in the girls' room, Sujin was surprised that Kang had brought so few things for the trip, and she explained that she had made sure to pack just enough to be comfortable. In fact, even Sujin noticed that Kang probably didn't take vacations often, which is why it was necessary to make this trip feel like one. A little later, Kim asked if the girls were ready, and they agreed, prepared to head out and explore the area. They came down the stairs from the girls' room, and Aesop noticed that Kang had changed into a different outfit for the outing, making him blush as he asked his sister why they were dressed like that, to which she cheerfully replied it was because they were on vacation. Whispering that Kang had an amazing figure, this made Aesop even more nervous as Kim led Kang toward the entrance where the car was parked. Sujin suggested that they could split into groups since they had limited time. She could go shopping with driver Kim, leaving Kang and Aesop to explore together to see if they could find anything fun nearby. With that, they waved and laughed before heading off, leaving the 2 of them alone near the hotel building. Kang said she would return after exploring the area, and Aesop added that they could go together to do that. The 2 walked through a forest, and Kang asked if he had mentioned before that he liked this path, to which Aesop replied that he didn't know because he hadn't been to places like this often. The protagonists said that when she was younger, there used to be a mountain like this near her home, and it became her and her friend's favorite park. They would go to the mountains together, look at the flowers, catch insects, and play under the summer sun. The smell of that forest brought back those memories, and Aesop agreed that it seemed like a nice memory. That's when the protagonist pointed to a tree full of ripe forest raspberries, known for the shape of their fruit. Kang approached to eat them, which worried Aesop, who asked if it was really safe to eat something like that so suddenly. She reassured him it was fine, saying they were sweet and delicious, smiling as she offered him one to try as well. So he opened his mouth and accepted the fruit she gave him, chewing slowly until he complained, because the raspberry was actually bitter and sour, and Kang realized that some of the berries weren't ripe yet. The 2 continued walking for some time, admiring the scenery together, enjoying the river, the beauty of the flowers, and all the nature around them. When Kang offered him a flower, she thought that she had never seen Aesop looking so calm and relaxed before. This made her happy because he really seemed to be enjoying his time there. It was a relief for both of them. A little later, they sat down on the grass, and Kang started mentioning something the executive director had said before, the idea of relaxing his shoulders and living a little, and she thought this might be a good moment for them to rest. That's why Kang was happy when he agreed to this trip, which made Aesop blush and look away, admitting that he had never been to a place like this before, but now he was enjoying it, until they noticed it had started raining. They got up and tried to cover themselves to escape the rain. Aesop suggested they head back, so the 2 began running from the rain, but the ground was slippery. He warned Kang to be careful as they walked, watching as she climbed over a rock. He grabbed her hand just in time when she slipped, surprising her with his quick reflexes. At the same time, Aesop asked her to hold his hand, and Kang thanked him, agreeing with his suggestion. Aesop felt like he was going crazy. Although it wasn't summer, he wondered why there was such heavy rain. They stopped running near a station, sitting on a bench, their bodies completely soaked. He looked at Kang for a moment before wringing out his jacket, which was drenched, and placing it over her shoulders. He told her that the assistant manager would be there soon, so Kang should use the jacket to stay warm until then. But looking more closely at Aesop, Kang replied that he seemed to need it more than she did. This made her ask if he was all right, noticing how soaked he looked as she reached out a hand toward him. This made Aesop blush, stammering as he pulled away, saying he was fine, just feeling a little warm from running. Still, the protagonist noticed that his face was completely red, and she asked for permission to check his forehead, placing her hand on it. She thought he might have a fever, and that they would have a problem if he caught a cold, but Isia pulled away again. He tried to deny her concerns, but he could feel something was wrong, to the point where he felt nauseous. That's when Kim and Soojin arrived with the car, shocked to see the two of them drenched from the rain, and told them to get in. After they got in, they commented that the rain had come out of nowhere, even though it wasn't in the weather forecast, so it was understandable they had been surprised. During the car ride, they hit a bump, and Kang and Isiup's knees accidentally touched, making Isiup blush as he turned to look out the window. But Kang didn't even notice, focused on her conversation with Kim and Soojin as they continued down the road. Back at the building, the four of them gathered to prepare something for dinner, and Isiup watched Kang from a distance. They all worked together to make a barbecue to enjoy their time, but Isiup couldn't stop watching Kang smile the entire time. Later that night, he went outside to be alone for a while, looking at the remnants of the flower he had kept from the forest. Suddenly, Kang called out to him, making him quickly hide the flower in his pocket as he saw her approach. She said she had been looking for him and asked why he was out there alone. Isiup responded that he just wanted some fresh air. The two sat down, and Kang confessed that she had really enjoyed the day. Perhaps she hadn't realized it because she had been working non-stop. But now that they were all having fun together, she felt like she was finally moving forward without having to look back. After a moment of silence, Isiup agreed that he had been living intensely, and now he felt like he was holding her back as well. This made her smile, replying that it wasn't true, explaining that ever since she was young, she had excelled at everything because she was smart. That's why she had always done well in school, even when she had to work after graduating from high school due to her financial situation. She thought everything would work out. In response, Isiup smiled and agreed that she had done a good job, and Kang continued, saying that she could do well as his assistant. She added that until he reached the top of TK Groot, she would be by his side and work hard to support him in any way she could, delivering great results. Kang's determination made Isiup blush a little, timidly agreeing again, asking her to do just that. Then, shortly after, one of their phones started vibrating with a call, and Kang realized it was hers. She excused herself to take the call. Isiup told her it was fine, letting her step away to answer, realizing it was Hyun on the line. They talked, and she explained that she was at work, attending a workshop with her colleagues from the company. When they returned to the company, no one could help but notice that Isiup had a slight smile hidden behind his usual cold demeanor. Sharp comments were wrapped in a gentle voice, revealing an inherent arrogance that not even his manners and rigid posture could conceal. The distinct traits of someone who had been in power all their life. This was the crown prince of the TK group. As she followed Isiup, Kang began informing him of his schedule, reporting that he had a dinner scheduled with Kim Hung-hoo, the CEO of Company N, at 5 p.m. After the dinner, there was a spa service booked for 8 p.m., and he agreed with everything she reported. Kang felt that Isiup was acting like a completely different person since they returned from their rest trip. Now, he was 10 times colder than the Isiup of the past, making her wonder if everything she saw back then was just her imagination. Deep down, she felt that Isiup had always been this way, but for some reason, he was acting more distant now. The two spent time together, even inside the car, and Isiup would sometimes glance at Kang when she was distracted. He would quickly turn his head away when she started talking, ready to go over his schedule, and he agreed, almost startled, that she had almost caught him spying on her. The protagonist mentioned that he had a business report at the headquarters at 10 a.m. and lunch with Lee Jong-wook, the CEO of Corporation E, at noon. And so she continued, making Isiup feel that, as always, she was working hard. This reminded him of how she had mentioned in that call that she was just working during the trip. It made him think that as she liked work so much, he would let her do it endlessly, without hesitation. At one point, Isiup went to Kang's desk and handed over several documents, asking her to organize everything before the next day's meeting. She immediately agreed, but when she finished, he commented that the legibility wasn't great and asked her to reorganize it and bring it back. Even so, he later asked her to revert to the original because it was better than what she had done. And again, Kang just agreed to his requests. Despite the mountain of tasks he had assigned her the previous week, her tone and attitude remained unchanged. Isiup knew she hadn't changed since the last time they had seen each other, but that was frustrating him. One evening, Kang knocked on his office door to let him know that dinner was ready. This time, it was mushroom risotto from Restaurant F and a wheatgrass juice. She thought it would be more convenient for him to eat this instead of his usual salad, making Icy-Up realize that it was his favorite dish when he dined at restaurants. It was perfect, as expected, but even so, he took a bite before dismissing her meal. He said that if it was to her taste, she should eat it, and also, he didn't drink things like wheatgrass juice. Although she was initially disappointed, she smiled politely and informed him that, as a precaution, she had prepared other dishes for him. This time, it was an abalone porridge specially ordered from Hotel L, and she wished him a good meal. Despite feeling almost furious because it was delicious, Icy-Up was irritated precisely because it tasted so good. A little later, he stopped by Kang's office, and she asked if he was leaving now because the car was already waiting for him. Then, Icy-Up was surprised to find that she had actually eaten the previous meal. When he asked why, she responded that he had told her to eat it, although he clarified that he hadn't meant it literally. Kang asked if he wanted to eat it again and if she should order more, which made him shout in denial, saying he had already eaten the porridge. Sighing, Icy-Up asked if she did these things on purpose to show off, but she elegantly denied it, saying she was only eating there to save time. Because she still had a lot of work to finish that day, Icy-Up sighed again, asking if she was really okay with eating that. This made her hesitate before responding that she had washed the spoon, so there was nothing to worry about, making Icy-Up feel like he was losing his mind. He grabbed her juice and drank it all, making her stammer that she had already started drinking from that glass. But he couldn't have cared less as he wiped his mouth after drinking, saying it had originally been his. If she intended to drink it, she could just order another one, which made Kang fall silent. Then he pointed to her computer screen, saying she had done a good job organizing the slides. He complimented her performance. After that, he left the room, and when he was alone, he started laughing to himself, still blushing. Remembering how tense Kang had become when he whispered in her ear, he hoped she had felt something from it. He had seen Kang blush that time, thinking she looked great like that, which made him smile non-stop. Time passed normally at work until one day, Icy-Up couldn't avoid feeling tense. When Kang called him, they headed to the meeting room, where she apologized to those present, asking if they had been waiting long. Seated at the table, the legal representative from MP, Min Ji-hoo, greeted the executive director with a smile and introduced himself as the legal advisor for the FA case concerning the Baekyang resort. Next to Min was also Hyeon, another lawyer who accompanied him. Icy-Up recognized him immediately and greeted him. It was problematic because this unlucky guy was starting at TK this time. Icy-Up thought as he shook hands with Min. The negotiation for the TK Group's merger and acquisition project for the resort, which was steadily progressing, was now in full swing. A task force had been established in the resort business division by FA, but Icy-Up wondered why. Out of all the firms, they had to send Hyeon. Looking at him made Icy-Up clearly uncomfortable, though he had been the one to choose the firm in the first place. As time went on with work continuing, Kang felt that they had a heavy workload after that brief, lovely trip. From the busy secretary's tasks to assisting the FT team, she had become so consumed with work that she barely noticed the time passing. Moreover, for some unknown reason, Icy-Up had been treating her harshly for some time. Thinking about it made her feel like it was quite childish on his part, but it wasn't something she couldn't handle. Meanwhile, Icy-Up was taking care of his own tasks, still thinking about his interactions with Kang. He noticed she seemed a bit exhausted lately, which made him wonder if he had been too hard on her. But he shook his head, reminding himself that he was the boss, and it was natural to assign tasks to employees. Maybe he was just overthinking it again. When he went to Kang's office, he wondered where she had gone because he couldn't find her around. Approaching her desk, he noticed there was a large amount of stuff piled up, and it seemed like she wasn't even managing to eat properly. This made him mentally complain. If Kang was having trouble, she could have just said so from the beginning. Icy-Up decided to go to the area where the employees were, surprising them by showing up there. But he reassured them it was nothing serious, explaining that he was just passing through. The men commented that his attention to detail was boosting team morale. They had received several messages through Secretary Kang recently. They remarked that the secretary was especially exceptional, always knowing everything. Surely, she must be quite busy with her personal life too. Still, it was impressive how she managed to handle things so quickly, and Isiop agreed, thinking the same as they did. She was always doing an excellent job as his secretary, so he asked where she was now. They replied that she was likely with the FT team, prompting him to quickly turn and head in that direction without hesitation. Wondering why she was with them at that time, he walked to the room where she was supposed to be. Inside, Kang was working on her computer, talking to Hyun and Min beside her, which irritated Isiop. From a distance he watched, wondering when they had become so close, unable to stop himself from mentally cursing. He then opened the door, catching everyone by surprise, prompting Kang to ask what had brought him there so suddenly. Smiling, Isiop commented that she looked busy, and she nervously replied that she was finishing up delivering the documents. Hyun interrupted, expressing his gratitude, saying he had requested the documents earlier at the office, and Kang had delivered an impeccable report. Even the auditors were impressed when they saw it, and it was all thanks to her that they received such assistance. Isiop continued by stating that she was indeed very competent, probably too busy now to handle such matters. He asked if she had compiled the construction contract status for the overseas project and about the progress of the expansion project in Saudi Arabia. Kang replied that the data was organized and the relevant department was gathering the expansion statuses. It would all be ready by 3 p.m. This led Isiop to question if she didn't know her priorities, and she promised to correct that. Isiop then approached Hyun, reminding him that the data should have been organized by him, since that was the reason he was hired. He also asked if the executive director's secretary of TK's business department was his friend or something like that. Hesitating, Hyun apologized, saying his lack of attention had caused issues with the work, and Isiop agreed that was indeed the case. As Isiop was leaving, he asked if Kang wasn't going to accompany him, and she agreed that she would. The two left while Isiop wished everyone a good continuation of their work, still with that smile that made everyone tense. He also ordered them not to interfere with his secretary as he closed the door behind him, still glancing at everyone. That's when Kang's childhood memories began to resurface, about how she, Lee, and Hyun were always together. Even Hyun could remember how they ate raspberries in the forest, or how she had changed from the child she once was to the woman she had become. At the time, she had asked him when his enlistment would be, and Hyun told her it would be in the first week of the following month. Kang was sad, saying she didn't think she could survive school without him, and he laughed, reassuring her that there was nothing to worry about. He promised he would return soon, and she should just wait a little longer, making Kang smile back, saying she would wait for him. Later in the present, the protagonist felt exhausted because lunchtime had ended so quickly. The trip must have been effective because Isiop had been working tirelessly since then. Because of this, she had been so busy that she could barely tell day from night properly. But that was better than Isiop avoiding his responsibilities like he used to before they had grown closer. At that moment, she felt hungry and decided to buy something simple to eat. Entering the convenience store, she was surprised because most of the workers from Office K couldn't have a proper meal, and all the lunchboxes were sold out. Kang needed to eat to keep going, but there was nothing there to recharge her energy before returning to work. That's when she walked down the aisles and bent down to pick up a package of instant food that seemed perfect. Suddenly, Isiop appeared beside her, asking why she was crouching down, and the protagonist noticed him. He took the instant food from her hand, and although she said it was fine, he paid for the meal anyway. The two left the store, and Isiop invited her to sit and eat together, so they headed to the park. They sat on a bench, where Isiop opened a drink for himself, and the protagonist observed him from the corner of her eye. While drinking, Isiop noticed Kang watching him intensely, which made him blush slightly from the attention. This reminded him of how Junseop had once said that girls found it attractive when men drank in that exaggerated way. This made him give a slight smile, wondering if he had just unintentionally displayed such charm. He then commented that he had seen someone drink that way before and found it annoying, but it was quite refreshing when he tried it himself. The protagonist began to open the food she bought and asked if he had any trouble with digestion, and he hesitantly denied it. A bit frustrated by her lack of reaction, he noticed that she had bought a package of those snack bars she liked to eat since their training days in the past. She was surprised that Isiop remembered and offered one to him as well, which he took while looking away. He recalled during their training days when the protagonist had shown her favorite chocolate bar to the other students. She had said it had the best cost-benefit ratio, even when considering the cheap cost per 100 grams, and when factoring in the amount and the taste of the nuts, it was incomparable. Isiop remembered hearing her talk about that, and it seemed like she hadn't changed much from back then to the present. Just like before, the chocolate was still very sweet, and the caramel stuck to Isiop's mouth. Both in the past and now, it seemed like Isiop couldn't stop watching Kang, no matter what she was doing. Another day, the protagonist was heading to the elevator when Hyeon approached her. He laughed, saying he had finished his work much later, while Kang had left early. She agreed, saying she was almost done with her tasks for the day, and Hyeon smiled, noticing how hard she had been working lately. Reaching out, Hyeon touched her shoulder and noticed her heavy bag, to which Kang explained that her laptop was inside. Hyeon entered the elevator, mentioning that they could have dinner together since he knew some good restaurants nearby, and she agreed that it sounded great. He confessed that he had wanted to invite her to dinner after his first day working there, but she always seemed busy. This made the protagonist laugh as she apologized, and they continued talking while riding the elevator together. So, they went out to dinner at a restaurant, with Kang even shivering at how tasty the meat was. This made Hyeon laugh as he told her not to rush and to just enjoy the time to eat. The protagonist felt like she was in heaven in some way, and she even accepted the glass of water when he offered it to her. He asked her not to skip meals just because she was busy. She certainly looked tired. That said, he wanted her to keep serving herself and eat well while they were there. The two spent a good amount of time together, eating, chatting, and smiling at each other that night. A bit later, Hyeon was driving through the streets after dinner, with Kang sighing because she would have to go to work again the next day. She grumbled that she didn't want to go home, which made Hyeon nervous, asking what exactly she meant. Kang explained that if she went home, she would shower and sleep, and when she woke up, it would be morning, and again she would have to work. This made him laugh again, noting that she seemed like a complete workaholic at her job, but still had a lively social life. That made the protagonist sigh, because he treated her like a little girl, even though she was an assistant at work. He agreed that she was right. It seemed like she had grown a lot since then, and she was very good at her job, to the point where Isiop always praised her. Kang apologized for what had happened last time. She hadn't expected the executive director to get so angry when she left his office. She assumed he was like that, but she hadn't imagined he would behave that way towards Hyeon, which made him chuckle nervously. Hesitating, Kang said it must have been something else because earlier he had asked her what kind of relationship she and Hyeon had. That's when she revealed that they were just childhood friends, but she immediately regretted saying that because Isiop had clearly gotten irritated. She knew he must have misunderstood the situation and thought Hyeon was helping her because of their long-standing friendship. She understood Isiop's point of view, but it didn't seem like something worth getting so angry about, especially because Isiop had also been curious to know if anything had happened between her and Hyeon at the hotel that other day. Before, Hyeon had pushed Isiop away from Kang and guided her to the elevator, still holding her by the shoulder because she was too drunk to manage on her own. He had helped her walk to her room, commenting that she was in a complicated state, and Kang celebrated because the room was so nice. She jumped around like a happy child, feeling like she was on vacation, while Hyeon looked at her bed for a moment. That's when Kang tried to take off her coat, but couldn't unbutton it by herself. She asked for help, though Hyeon was embarrassed, sighing because she was far too drunk. As he helped her, he remembered Isiop and questioned why Kang had drunk so much when she knew she had low tolerance. He scolded her, telling her she should know how dangerous it was to be that vulnerable. But she didn't see a problem and just pulled away, leaving Hyeon frustrated as she sat down on the bed. He sighed and covered his face with his hands, muttering that it was far too dangerous to leave her alone like that. Now, when the protagonist asked Hyeon if anything had happened at the hotel the day she drank, he reassured her that nothing had happened. This left her relieved, and Hyeon chuckled nervously, agreeing that the executive director's personality was indeed peculiar. This made her laugh because it was true. The next day, Isiop had been very demanding with his food. As Kang complained about Isiop, Hyeon remained silent while she spoke as he drove. But inside, he couldn't help but feel that Isiop was actually very annoying, even too much, in his opinion. Time passed for the protagonist, who returned to work while on a call around 7 in the evening. She said she'd be home in 30 minutes, with no overtime that day and ready to have dinner. She thought about grabbing some food on the way home and asked if they wanted Chinese food, as there were many good restaurants nearby. Then she noticed Isiop behind her with an intense look, and the protagonist stammered, saying she thought he had already gone home. This made him smile as he explained that he'd be staying late at the office that day, surprising her. He said he should have mentioned it earlier because he needed to coordinate the comprehensive services related to the energy department with the plant business in the construction sector. He filled her in on how busy he was with many things to schedule and handle. Then he glanced at the phone in Kang's hand, smiling discreetly as Kang apologized over the phone, saying she couldn't make it to dinner that night. Sarcastically, Asura said it didn't seem like she could go out for dinner with Hyun, which left her with a less than happy expression. He laughed, saying that if she had plans, she should just go. If she had all the requested data, she should just hand it over. She stammered that she hadn't finished yet, and Asura continued, saying she could give him whatever she had because the director could do overtime alone. It was an obvious concern, and Kang smiled, saying she couldn't allow that and would need to stay to help him. Isiop was worried about Kang surviving only on chocolate bars, and instead of going home after work, he had decided to come up with an elaborate plan, using 100% of his brain for this single important moment. After waiting for Kang's overtime to end, he would make up an excuse to return to the office. The second step would be to order some delicious food, and then suddenly he would receive a phone call and leave right after Kang had eaten. It was the perfect plan that would make Kang feel even closer to him for allowing her to go through such a thing. However, he miserably failed in his task now and wondered why she needed to schedule dinner with that guy again. Sighing, Isiop lay on the table, murmuring that he came to take care of her, but now had just made her work even more than before. Even he himself had ended up stuck working late, which certainly made him think Kang must be furious with him. A bit more optimistically, he hoped it would be fine if he bought something delicious for Kang to eat. He needed to make sure she ate first of all. With that, he left his office to discuss dinner with her, but her tired and gloomy face with a forced smile made him tense. Hesitating before approaching, he said that if she mentioned his name at Restaurant F, they would take care of it, but just in case, he wrote a note. Handing it to her, she replied that she would make sure to use it the next time she placed an order. He even tried to talk about the risotto, but calmly ignored him to answer the phone, making him start to sweat. He wondered if he should suggest she ordered 2 portions, worried she would certainly refuse to dine with him. He could imagine Kang making an overly detailed order, asking to spread the risotto rice, reduce the meat, and increase the parmesan. For the salad, she might ask for mozzarella and cherry tomatoes in balsamic vinegar, basil pesto, and white wine vinaigrette. Hesitating, he started talking about the risotto, trying to muster the courage to ask for more food in addition to the regular dinner. However, Kang simply put down the phone and smiled, saying she would go out to eat and would be back shortly. So, she could pick up his dinner on the way back, leaving Isiop behind in silence. Later, Kang returned to hand in his dinner, and Isiop accepted it without even looking in her direction. Then he asked her to clarify something in the document on his screen because the dates didn't seem to match up. As she approached, Isiop stood up and pushed the chair for her to sit for a moment, thinking they should go over it again. Kang did as he asked and began typing on the computer. Then Isiop questioned what she had eaten, as she looked even hungrier than before, and if it was another chocolate bar, which made Kang avert her gaze, still quiet and with a serious expression. Then he grabbed the food plates, giving her the main dish while he took the salad, saying they should eat now. She stammered that she was fine because it was his food, but Isiop replied that he wasn't hungry and would just have the salad. This made her stand up, suggesting she could order something else, which frustrated Isiop, who ruffled his hair, blushing. When he asked her to at least eat a little, Kang hesitated for a moment before sitting back down. The smell of Isiop's cologne was intoxicating her and leaving her breathless, but Isiop simply said that it was better than fried chicken and that his palate was quite refined. Though she said it was delicious, deep down, the risotto tasted like nothing.